Welcome to the Vital Voices Live podcast. This is a podcast that is dedicated to celebrating the game changers, the rule breakers, and fearless women who are shaping the world. I'm your host, Elise Nelson, and I am thrilled, honored today to be joined by two extraordinary women who are not just reimagining the tech space, but actually are redefining it. Creating a space that is more inclusive, more equitable, and I couldn't be more thrilled to have you in this space. Of course, Karlie Kloss is a household name. We all know the iconic supermodel. But what I love about Karlie is not that she has been on 40 Vogue covers, that's pretty exceptional, but what I love about you, Karlie, is that you truly understand your power and you've used it to empower. Whether it be through founding Kode With Klossy that has empowered so many young women in tech. I know many of them are here today. Many of them. To working and investing in organizations, being an entrepreneur. I mean, you have really used your platform and your voice for good. So thank you so much for that. And then I want to introduce Osi. You, of course, joined Karlie as the CEO and of Kode With Klossy, and of course brought with you incredible experience from your many years in the tech sector, in politics, working on Hillary for America, for example, but also with Chan Zuckerberg, with Google, with eBay, and the list goes on. So thank you so much for being here. But also, Osi, what I think is so extraordinary about you, and the first time I met you, I'm just so excited to partner with Kode With Klossy, is that you could be anywhere. You could be in Silicon Valley, and you decide, actually, I want to dedicate my skills, my talent, my leadership to investing in the next generation of women to be in this space, to redefine this space. And I thank both of you because I know that our world will be stronger because of it. So, Karlie, I want to start with you.
Well, first I just have to say thank you, Elise. Thank you for, first of all, having us and for your incredibly kind words. I echo everything you just said about Osi. She is a force in the world, and we are so lucky to have her leading the charge at Kode With Klossy. And speaking of forces in the world, you are a force in the world, and I am so grateful for your leadership for many years and now more than ever. And I am so proud to be a small but proud supporter of Vital Voices for a long time, and so grateful for the partnership we've been able to have with Kode With Klossy, and just thank you for all you do in the world.
Well, as you know, we're here at the Vital Voices Global Embassy, our global headquarters, and it wouldn't be possible without women like you who truly believed in it before it was a place. Many people can come here and say, oh, this is beautiful and what a great idea. But there are some people like you who invested your support and also your name, because that's a big deal to put your name on something and to say, I'm behind this, I believe in it, before it was even a thing.
Thank you. I'm all in, but also the reason why I was introduced to Vital Voices in the first place was because of a shared mentor of ours who we are both so lucky to have, Deanne von Furstenberg, and she is another force for good in the world, and she has been an incredible mentor and just friend in my life, and she was the first one to really tell me about Vital Voices and introduce me to the global work that you do. So thank you.
Yes.
And thank you,
We have been thrilled, of course, to host Kode With Klossy Camp here a couple different summers. I think we've done it 3 summers now. And the energy and the creativity they bring into this space is totally infectious. So it's wonderful. Karlie, I want you to start off by talking about founding Kode With Klossy. I mean, it started as just really curiosity on your part, and it's turned into a movement. It's 11,000?
More than 11,000 young women around the world from more than 100 countries, which is honestly surreal for me to even say. The community is extraordinary. What Kode With Klossy has grown into, the team behind it, I am blown away by every single day. And I'm so proud of the work we're doing. For instance, this summer, we'll have thousands of more young women in our camps around the world. But it started very humbly and really innocently. I guess I had no idea what I was embarking on. And I'm so grateful that I sort of took this wild journey more than 10 years ago. So this will be our 10th year of running programs at Kode With Klossy. And it started I guess the summer before that, I went back to school and took a coding boot camp. And I guess I should rewind to sort of zoom out of why. Why, I would say, is because I am a nerd. I am a proud nerd. I always have been, long before I was on a cover of Vogue. And I love to learn about the world. I love science. My dad is a doctor. I'm one of 4 daughters. I grew up in Missouri, and I thought I would live in Missouri and be a doctor someday. And life took another turn when I was 15 years old, which is the age of many scholars in our programs, which is pretty crazy to me to think about, as such a young woman, but I had this incredible opportunity to build a career in fashion that happened very quickly. And I continued my studies along that career path. And I was traveling the world, and I was having these incredible opportunities to meet extraordinary people along the way. And I have always used my job as a key to the world, as a key to learn from people who are the foremost world experts at so many different things. And I think because I have always sort of approached my job in that way, and maybe my life in that way, I haven't been afraid to ask questions. And I guess maybe in a way, I'm not afraid to sort of ask the dumb questions that nobody else is willing to ask, just to sort of understand how things work and how things are built. So fast forward to, it was the summer of 2014 that I decided to go take a coding boot camp. And the reason was because I was meeting so many founders of big tech companies and so many people who were transforming the world and building incredible enterprise value through technology. And behind this technology was code. And it was, you have to think a decade ago plus, it was a much more abstract, intellectual kind of concept, or at least it was to me. And it felt very off limits to most people. It felt very almost, I want to say, just out of, like, a little elitist, a little out of access. It wasn't something at my public school in Missouri that I had a class on. And it was before online education was sort of as available. And so it was really something that I was so curious about. What is this secret language of code, and how can I learn it? Or at least how can I understand the magic of it? And that was really the initial sort of reason why I started on this journey. I didn't plan to start an education nonprofit. I didn't plan to get a job in tech. I just wanted to sort of understand how it worked. And it was really sort of an eye-opening experience to understand the sort of hardware aspect and the software aspect of how things are built. And maybe that's because I always wanted to be a doctor. So to me, I kind of saw it as this lens of like, almost like the anatomy of a computer and how the sort of like, how it works. And then understanding the sort of software component of the creative language of code and how creative you can actually be through this language. If you can get over the sort of abstract nature of sort of syntax. And at the time I was just learning sort of Ruby on Rails, and I was building a website, and it was very sort of entry level. I was really learning more high level, but even still I was one of the only women in the school that I was learning at, which was the Flatiron School. And it was sort of this eye-opening moment to kind of look around at the broader things happening in the world in 2014, 2015, and realizing this incredible momentum that was happening in technology and how much was going to continue to happen, and this disconnect of who was actually behind these companies, who is founding these companies, who is building this technology, and why is that the case? Why are there not more women here? And that was really a kind of wake-up call for me, not to, again, I could have never imagined that we would have 11,000 young women who would be a part of our programs. I started small. I started with a scholarship in 2015 for 21 young women to have the same coding bootcamp experience that I did. And those 21 women, well, I have to tell you, we had thousands of applications for those 21 spots. And that was really the kind of moment that I realized, okay, I'm not the only nerd out here who's interested in learning sort of this magic language of code. And so it's blossomed into such an incredible sort of community. And Osi has joined us in the last 2 years and really is taking the organization to another level. But I will stop there because I'm going to just chat your ear off all night long.
Oh, we love it. We love it. Osi, as I mentioned, you've had this incredible career, and I think about how there were probably not a lot of role models who looked like you. I mean, when I was growing up, I don't remember any opportunities to get involved. I mean, my dad has a PhD in math and a computer scientist and worked in the space, but I never thought the space was for me. How did you believe the space was for you? And then how do you keep up with all the changes and make sure that the curriculum that you're offering to these girls is going to give them the latest and greatest?
Yeah, I love this question. So I am the daughter of Nigerian immigrants. And so this was one of the acceptable careers, lawyer, doctor, engineer. And so that's how I knew it was for me, because I was told that those are my three options. But honestly, I think for me, because of the household I grew up in, the limitations weren't really something that I thought of. And yes, I was the only in pretty much every space. But I think the confidence that I had from my parents, the knowledge that excellence was the goal, and I think sort of an innate sense of agency around how my life could unfold were really helpful. And so I take that as a great privilege that I had that sort of background to not really think about the limitations. But I do remember that I got a scholarship from Xerox for one of the years that I went to undergrad. And Ursula Burns was one of the first female CEOs and the first Black and only CEO, Black woman CEO of IBM. And so, of Xerox. And so I think that like understanding the possibility through her, getting that scholarship sort of reinforced messages that I had. But I think that reinforcement is really critical. It's one thing to hear it once, but I think habits and mindsets are formed by repetition. And I think that the combination of those sort of small glimmers of hope were very helpful. And so when I think about what we're doing at Kode With Klossy and trying to prepare young women for the world and the rapidly changing world, I think those mindsets are just as important as the curriculum that we're teaching. And so when we think about our programs, we think about this is a point in time on a lifelong learning journey. And hopefully what we're instilling is a curiosity about technology and a sense that when built with intention, these spaces don't have to feel hostile. They can feel like you don't have to abandon yourself, that you can bring all the parts of yourself that you want, not necessarily your whole self, but as many parts of yourself as you want, and it can be joyful and it can be rigorous at the same time. And so that's how we think intentionally about creating experiences. It's not just what we are teaching, but how we are teaching it, and infusing that, again, with the joy and the rigor and the inclusivity that we hope to see. And also giving our scholars a sense of the possibility, right? If you can experience it here in our programs, it's possible to experience outside. And so we're setting a standard for what they should expect in experiences that they have going forward. On the curriculum side, how we think about it is, I don't think we've all gone a day without saying the word AI or the acronym AI. And so as we think about the fact that AI is, yes, the technology of today, but there's going to be another wave coming. And so again, this notion of lifelong learning is really important, but we're obviously adapting our curriculum to think about not only how we're equipping our young people to be responsible creators of AI, but critical consumers, right? We want both. I want the young people in our community to be the next Mira Muradis, to be the next Dr. Feifei Lees, to be the next Dr. Joy Bolomwini, like all of the people who are creating these fundamental companies or technologies or insights, as well as discerning users of the technology. So not only consuming, but creating, I think is really important. And we're infusing that into all of our curriculum. So we're talking about generative coding tools. We're talking about how you discern whether what the tool told you was a hallucination or whether it was correct. We're giving them many ways the literacy tools around AI so that they can be successful.
That's great. Well, I have to say I loved meeting many of your alums who were just with us right before we came here. Yes, who are here. And the thing that was incredible, the through line, was one, how their experience changed their life, and two, that they paid it forward, doing it for others, engaging other women. And I'd say actually 3, that they did not talk about one experience. It was a multitude of experiences. And I think that's so critical. We believe so much in that at Vital Voices that you can't support leaders through a one-off. You have to be there on the best day, the worst day. You have to be there with them to walk the journey. And they're going to need different things at different times. And what I loved is, and you'll have to talk a little bit about this, how you bring back alumni to be like, I'm not going to get the
Instructor assistants.
Instructor assistants.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think in general, I think the arc for us, we completely agree with you when we think about the investment that we want to make in young people. It's really a decade-long commitment. People onboard in our community when they're 13 to 18. And our hope is that we're providing enough value as a supportive infrastructure that they stay with us all the way through the age of 26. I'll talk about why that milestone is important in a second. But again, a decade-long commitment of support that looks like coming back to do more curriculum, but it also looks like coming back to do our instructor assistant program. And maybe you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm so glad you got to meet them, Elise, and sit there at that table with us. And I am always so emotional when I sit with our scholars because I am so blown away by each of their stories of how, and I at first when Kode With Klossy, when I would meet an alumni a few years later and hear what they were doing, I thought this must be a fluke. This must be the one person that this really touched their life. It changed the course of what they decided to study in and the confidence they took into those spaces and the career opportunities that opened up for them. I was like, this must be the one person. And you know what? If it all would have been for one person, it would have been worth it.
Right.
But I have to tell you, it is a story that I hear so often. And I just sat with you at a table with 15 incredible alumni who have been in our programs, some actually dating back. I'm looking at Caroline right now, who I first met in St. Louis in 2016. She was 15 years old. She was a rising freshman in high school. And I mean, I was looking back at the photos and we were both babies.
You were both babies.
We were both babies. And it's just incredible to me to hear the stories of not only how sort of that initial 2-week program opened their eyes and developed their skills, but the community that Osi is really talking about is what I think is really what makes Kode With Klossy so unique, because we continue to offer opportunities, of course, for them to come back into our programs from 13 to 18. And then once you graduate post 18, you can come back as an instructor assistant. And that is sort of a near peer leadership opportunity where you actually are helping teach the curriculum to other scholars who are just like you. And they see instructor assistants as this sort of like big sister who's kind of a few steps ahead of them down the line. And to me, I'm one of 4 daughters. Like that near peer relationship is actually arguably more impactful than like the big mentor, someone you can read a book about or maybe a teacher at your school.
It seems so far away.
They all matter, but like that near peer sort of mentor, friend, ally is critical. Yeah. And I think that has been this sort of incredible byproduct that is developed through the community and this compounding effect that has had. And it is amazing to see. And I think that is a huge testament to why Kode With Klossy continues to play a role in so many of our scholars' lives. And Osi and the team continue to build out programmatic ways that we can continue to support them along their journey. So it's something, and we're 10 years into this, but we're going to continue to stay with these scholars for as long as we're out here doing this.
I think that's right. And I think, instructor assistants are for sure near peer leaders, but I think the piece that we think about a lot is the culture that we are creating, and again, the cultural expectations around that and how IAs, instructor assistants, can model that, right? So it's really about, again, our programs are about what we teach for sure. Web development, mobile app development, data science, AI and ML. That is a fundamental piece of what we do. But the how and the culture around that is so, so important because you sort of need to armor yourself for the world outside that is not like Kode With Klossy, right? Where you are not one of many women in these programs. And again, a sense of worth and belonging and an understanding of the possibility is a cultural seed that we hope we're planting. And so I think that that is just as important as obviously the near peer leadership and the skill building that comes from being trained as an instructor assistant. But the cultural piece is really important as well.
And just to add to that too, just to give some color.
I love the two of you.
Oh, well, I mean, we could sit here with you all night. But
We are here all
sorry, guys. We'll get you out of here on time. But to give some color, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily know the inner workings of even how we run our programs. So we are very rigorous in teacher training and in training our instructor assistants. We build all of our curriculum in-house. You heard Osi talk about the 4 different tracks. And we are, we are very serious about what we do and very serious and intentional about how we teach it, and always have been from the start. That was always sort of this kind of intention and philosophy that actually the original school that I learned at, Flatiron School, always said, the founder of it always said, it's easier to teach a great teacher how to code than it is to teach a great engineer how to be a great teacher.
Wow.
And that always really resonated with me of how important it is of the way in which you do what you do. And we live in a time where you can learn anything for free on the internet. So really the differentiating factor for why Kode with Klossy is so sticky and impactful in the lives of our scholars, I really believe it comes down to the people behind it.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more. We've, over the last 28 years, Vital Voices has invested directly in about 47,000 women. And one of the things that we have found is, yes, it's the coming back, participating over time, supporting people over time. But one of the things that they say to a person, yes, that fellowship was amazing. Yes, that grant came at the right time, or that visibility opportunity. But at the network, the community, that's everything. Because when I feel lost, I know there's another woman, halfway around the world who is doing it and fighting, and she's encouraging me. And one of the things that we found, and I'm curious as to if you've found similar results, is that when women are part of non-hierarchical, non-competitive, and very diverse networks, they take bolder risks for change. And when you think the last 10 years, are there fellows that stick out for you or alumni that stick out for you and you're like, whoa, we saw that woman take a bold risk and it paid off? Like, are there those alums that really stand out? I mean, they all stand out, but really stand out for you, and you're like, that, whoa.
I mean, so many.
know, it's
I
hard
could
to
sit
pick.
here and tell you stories all night. But one thing I just want to comment on about what you had said about the network, because I think, it's funny, we both run nonprofits, right? We constantly are having to have conversations with donors of like, what do you do and what's the value to it? And I think that a network is something that's like hard to calculate why that matters so much. And I don't know, I don't think it's even a gendered thing, but we do happen to both, be a part of networks of incredible women leaders. And I think that there is something intangible about that sort of just innate understanding of feeling seen and of worthiness, and just that, I don't know, that human connection that you get out of a network like this. And I think that it's hard to measure that for your funders. It's hard to measure that in a grant report, but it matters.
No, it does. It is more intangible, but it's so incredibly powerful. Okay, I'm not gonna.
Okay, Scholar Story, you go first.
Okay, I thought, well, maybe she's answering a different question because she doesn't want to have to pick.
Oh no,
a
I mean, I don't want to pick favorites. I have
These are not favorites. You asked for a story.
just a story.
I love all our scholars.
But I feel the same way. People ask me, "Oh, talk about one woman." I'm like, one woman?
Yeah.
There's 47,000.
No, for sure. And so, I think of someone like Madeline Gupta, who is one of our young alumni who is studying at Yale in particular, but sort of neither here nor there that it's Yale. I think as a Native woman who is also underrepresented multiple times over in technology, she is using this technology to make an impact for her Indigenous community in ways that, again, for us, is a prime example of why this matters, because as people with different lived experiences, you can solve problems that only you can see. And that was something that she had a lived experience in. She has now the technical skill to go solve that problem. And so for me, that's a resonant example, because if Madeline hadn't had the skill, hadn't been in our program, hadn't gained a sense of the agency and possibility, maybe that solution to bring that to her community would have never manifested. And that's why it's so important for us to be in this work, is because we're missing out on a whole collection of incredibly creative, impactful solutions by not making sure that everybody who wants to be in this space feels like they can be. And so I love the story of Madeline and what she's doing with VR and AI for her Indigenous community. Yeah.
Well, as your fellows that are here were talking, I was like, oh, come work for us.
Yeah.
Desperately need their great skills. I don't know if we can afford them, but. So talk a little bit about mentorship, because I feel like in many ways you're in the business of supporting and mentoring. I mean, it is all the intangible, all the things that happens, as we say, off the side of our desk, right? Which is supporting and building this next generation of leaders. What's the question you get again and again? The most common question you get from rising women in this space as they're coming into the program that you feel like you're trying to mentor them through?
Well, can I take issue with mentorship for 2 seconds?
Okay. Oh,
We love a controversial take. Go.
No controversy, no controversy. But I do think that, I think to the points that were made earlier, I think there's a ton of value in the peer relationships that are built.
Yeah.
And often, especially when we hear the word mentor, sorry, Mike, when we hear the word mentor, we think about, I need to find the VP or the CEO or somebody who's like light years ahead of me to help me understand.
I want to be mentored by your alums.
Exactly.
too.
Please.
And so I think I like to shy away from that word a little bit so that people see the possibility of their near peer network and helping support them. But we get questions like, what should I major in? Or how do I become the CTO of X? Or should I take this job at Y company? And so a lot of this is you just need a sounding board and advice. You don't need a mentor, really, in that sort of heavy way to help you sort of navigate some of these questions. And so I would just encourage, and I try to encourage our young people that, these are questions that you can seek advice and stories from multiple people. It doesn't have to be one sort of mentor in that sort of gravitas way that I think we're all sort of trapped in. I think that's it's a difficult frame. But yes, we often get that question, how do I find a mentor? And again, it's like, don't put so much pressure on it. There are lots of people, especially when you're young, people like to answer questions for young people and sound smart. And so I think that's the opportunity at your disposal, is to ask as many people as possible for their thoughts. And then your job is to assimilate that into something that makes sense for you. But there's no one path. And so I think that encouraging folks to think about the fact that, look, if you'd asked me 20 years ago, 25 years ago when I graduated, I tried to make myself younger, 25 years ago when I graduated, would I be working for a nonprofit? That wasn't a projection I could make for myself. And so the ability to do adaptive planning, what's the next best move based on where I am, I think is really important. So yeah, I would just put a little less stress on that.
Well, I think, listen, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves.
Yes.
I don't think it's just a young woman thing. I feel like that's that, and maybe I'm sure men are the same, but I think that's something that I see a lot with our scholars. And by the way, I experienced certainly at many points in my own life, in my own career, especially starting a career at such a young age, in such a public way, and put an enormous amount of pressure. And I think that level of perfectionism and is really exists in the culture and is really toxic. And I think that something I really try to remember in my own life and encourage our scholars is to sort of kind of take a deep breath and know that you never fail. You either succeed or you learn. And then you move on and you evolve, and life is not it's non-linear. My life has not been a linear straight line in any sense. And I think maybe that's just something you have to learn through time and experience. But as much as I can, I try and remind young women in our community to, to take a deep breath and to sort of put one foot in front of the other, because that's really all any of us can do. And I think, to your last question of sort of stories of scholars, I mean, I could sit here and tell you so many things that our scholars are doing like in real time it's themes. It's not just one person. I hear it a lot. A lot of our scholars, while they're still in high school, are starting coding programs at their schools, are starting, mentorship and mentorship is this sort of big, scary word. I agree. It's like actually just bringing somebody else into the conversation. Like that is mentorship. And that's what so many of our scholars do. They sort of use this skill that they've learned through Kode With Klossy to open the door for somebody else. And that can have, I've now experienced that so many times in so many facets of my life. You never know where that could lead. And I think there's so many other things that, our scholars, like, I could sit here and tell you, there's one young woman in the room, Alexis, who's been in our community from, I think I first met her when she was 16. I think she didn't even have a laptop. I think that was one of the first things we had to figure out how to get her. And she has gone on to do extraordinary things.
I love the confidence of a young woman applies for Kode With Klossy and doesn't have a laptop.
Oh, well.
That's
you don't need a laptop.
You don't need it. So I was
don't,
going to
no.
say, part of what we try to do is remove as many barriers as possible. And so you show up at a Kode With Klossy program with nothing but the courage to say, this is something I want to learn.
So great.
And we provide you with a laptop, and we provide you with snacks and lunch, and we provide you with the ability to have a dance break in the middle of the day, and we provide you with a transportation subsidy if you want, because what that then results in is a room full of young people from every socioeconomic background, from every political background, from every region of the country, and what unites them in common cause is this desire to see themselves in an industry that still 30, 40 years later, after we continue to admire the problem, does not represent women in the ways that it should. And so that diversity of lived experience is possible when you reduce as many barriers as possible. And so laptops are provided for everybody in our program so that that's not an issue.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, just back to something we were talking about earlier on the mentorship piece. One of the things that I believe so strongly in, and now has actually been proven by research, is that the difference between men and women, when women get to a certain level of leadership, they never stop asking for feedback, no matter what their title is, no matter how much they've achieved, how many years of experience, it's constant feedback. And I'm a huge believer in that, because I feel like, you don't arrive at leadership. If you arrive, like you're not going to be there much longer if you think this is the end of the road. You've got to constantly learn and invest. And I think that communities of women are really critical at that. Karlie, I want to turn to talk about your entrepreneurship and the investments that you've made in women entrepreneurs. Women get what? I think it's like less than 2% of VC funding. It's tiny.
It might be up to 3, but it's nothing to celebrate.
Only because of you. So talk a little bit about how you decided to get involved in this space, why you think it's so important. Both of you, how do we bridge the gap? You've been involved, I know, also in investing. So
yeah,
you want to start?
Sure. I think like I said, I think maybe one of the best and worst things is that I'm just like, all right, you know what, I'll give it a shot. Like, it may fail, but I'm going to learn from it. And, I think that the first investment I ever made was in a company called Lola, and they were building sort of better for you, better for the planet tampons and feminine care products. And that was actually a business idea that I wrote in my journal at 15 years old. And I had sort of like sat on it forever, and I was like, okay. And I really love to nerd out on sort of business was another interest, and another area of interest I always had sort of had and cultivated and took advantage of sitting next to CEOs throughout my career and have always sort of learned from and paid attention to. And so I sort of had always had this interest in like, okay, somebody should build this. And I met these two women who were starting this company, and they were certainly better equipped to build it than me. And I was like, you know what? Instead of me spending X hours of my time or X capital, let me actually just put capital behind them. And that was sort of the first time that I had really thought about the power I had as, as a young woman who was building a career and had dollars to be able to invest and take that sort of risk behind founders that I really believed in and behind an idea I thought really mattered and could be a viable business and a better solution for a problem. And it was really sort of that first foray into understanding also the real disconnect of those funding and the sort of, it's sort of this self-fulfilling prophecy when you have most, people in VC who are writing checks of a certain lived experience, they might not understand why a more sustainable feminine care product company deserves capital. And so I think that's just sort of, for me, I've always sort of invested through the lens of better for you, better for the planet, out of my own maybe selfish desire as a consumer and as a citizen. And that has always sort of led my lens on that. And I love being entrepreneurial. In my other spare time, started a media company called Bedford Media, and we acquired a magazine called ID Magazine, which is this incredible storied fashion culture publication that's 45 years old, and are rebuilding sort of the engine of that business underneath a sort of iconic brand. And so that's been a fun new venture.
Wow. And I can't wait to see what you do with that, because I know you're really trying to reshape the narrative around women and women's leadership and what success looks like. I want to turn to back to you, Osi, on another really important topic, and it's something that all of us at Vital Voices deal with quite a bit, and that's so many of the women leaders we work with. I'm sure you've experienced this. I am sure many of the young women who've gone through your programs have experienced. You get to a certain level of influence, you get to a certain level of power, and the harassment, the online violence, there are challenges. And it is a challenge that it seems to be getting worse. Just this tech-facilitated gender-based violence that we're seeing. How do we combat this? I mean, certainly what you're doing and, sort of the heat at the bottom and the heat at the top, right? So heat at the bottom, building these thousands upon thousands of women who are going to rewrite the rules of tech. So hopefully that doesn't happen, right? There are more safeguards. But also, you've worked, in some of the, most admirable organizations and, there with some of the, most significant leaders in tech. How do you get them also to, how do we put some heat on the top as well?
Elise, good question.
No, we're trying. I mean, go.
Do you want to go? I think a lot of life just requires you to look at the incentive structure, right? People respond to the incentives in front of them. We're all like this, right? And so I think until the incentives change, I don't think there's going to be a lot of progress. Like we can sit here and talk about it forever, but the business models create a certain incentive. Again, I worked in ad tech. I pretty much understand some of the underlying incentives around what drives monetization and attention and eyeballs. And so those incentives fundamentally have to change for us to have a different conversation. And again, we can admire the problem for a long time, but I think that's part of what it takes. And I think then consumers are part of that, right? We have voted with our feet to, despite what we know to sometimes be icky, stay on these platforms that then monetize us. And so part of the responsibility is not just tisking the executives at these companies. We have to vote with our feet for a different type of environment and a different set of incentives that then follow our attention, because the money will go where we go. And the money is the incentives. These are for-profit companies, and so they need to make revenue. And so I think that it's a combination of what are the incentives around the business model, and then how are we, again, that word agency, we have some agency in these outcomes because we are the ones that they want to monetize. And so I think a little bit of is self-reflection of sort of where we are spending our time and attention.
Yeah. And just to also sort of jump in, I think, going back to an earlier question that you had, I forgot what you had asked, but it made me think like the first 10 years of Kode With Klossy, or the first chapter sort of pre-Osi joining, I would say, we're really fully just focused on how do we continue to create as many learning opportunities and access to these skills for young women as possible. And, that evolved from 21 scholars to 150. And, then we had virtual curriculum because of the pandemic. And now we're at this scale we're really proud of. But I think the next kind of evolution of the role that we need to play is also thinking about how we are helping shape the spaces that our scholars are going to enter into as employees and in the workplaces that they're going to be entering into. And so I think that's something that we're only just really starting this journey on, of the role that we can play in helping thread that needle, not just because of the responsibility that we feel of our scholars, but also because I think companies want to be, create spaces that are supportive to their employees. And this next generation, I mean, even our scholars are 10 years younger than me. They're a different generation. They think and work in different ways, and workplaces need to sort of adapt to that as well. And I think that there's so much that we can continue to grow into. And I think Osi brings such lived experience from her career and her many spaces that she has been in. I am constantly learning from her point of view. And I think that's something that really is guiding kind of the next evolution of the role that Kode With Klossy plays. We will continue to be the place you come to, and that entry point and opening that door for as many scholars as want to be in our programs. But, the next evolution is also how do we grow with them?
Right. And I think, again, just to tie it all together, I think this idea of, how do you address gender-based violence? It's when you have leaders who are running companies and who are building the products who have experienced it.
Exactly.
And have a sense of, okay, if we think 3 steps ahead, these are the kinds of protections we might put in place. And again, that leader has to be incentivized by the culture, by the CEO of that company, by, again, the ways in which they can build profitable, successful product around it. But again, the idea of having more people with diverse lived experiences, specifically women in those rooms, is so that those ideas are actually voiced and then acted on. And that takes women in leadership, that takes women with power to make decisions, that takes women with power to decide how resources are allocated. Really, it's this pathway into leadership that's really necessary to change the mix of decision makers who are creating the products that we're all not so happy with, but still continue to use on a daily basis. And so I think that that's part of this conversation. And so as Karlie just alluded to, we now have a community of 11,000 young women in 105 countries, 70% of whom are now 18 and older. And so how are we, from 2026 and on, really thinking about, okay, you have a deeply workforce ready, either in the workforce, right about to enter it, get that first internship, get that first entry-level job. How are we working with them, yes, to equip them, but how are we then creating the conditions for their success, right? So we talk often about the individual, but there's structures in workplaces, systemic reasons why women can't succeed. And so how do we have a both and conversation? How do we continue to make sure that, yes, our women show up with agency and decision-making and critical thinking and technically adept, but also that we are thinking about, well, let's think about promotion bias. Like, what are the ways in which there are policies and practices within companies that are preventing that really excellent woman from getting her first promotion to manager, which is a phenomenon that has been studied by the folks at McKinsey in partnership with Lean In. It's a phenomenon where for every 100 men that are promoted, only 81 women will get promoted. And you can imagine, frighteningly, that statistic is worse in technology. For every 100 men that are promoted, 52 women in technology are promoted. And so very early on in that leadership pathway, that first step to management, we're already leaving behind or not retaining young women on that pathway. So forget the glass ceiling. We got a problem before that, right? And so that's what the broken rung phenomenon is. And so as we start to think about, as our community reaches that point in the workforce, what are we proactively doing, both in equipping them as individuals, but then working with our partners to create the context and conditions for their success?
Wow. Thank you both so much. What an incredible conversation. I want to ask you both one last closing question, and it's something I would love to know, as well as I'm sure many in our audience. Both of you have led extraordinary careers. You have led very successful lives. balanced it all somehow. Congratulations on your third baby. But that's not the question I wanted to ask. But you've been successful, but you've also been significant. And I think that is so deeply important. What is the one piece of advice that you would tell those in the audience, not just the young women that are here, but I think for all of us who, this is a difficult and divisive time right now in the world. And I think people are looking for those words of wisdom. So who wants to start?
I mean, what a time, that's for sure. But I think that the thing I would say, where do I begin? I think for me, part of what I've had to grow into is sort of not being, how do I say this? I guess there's so much. There's no wrong answer. And I think I've always, maybe because I started living a public life through my career from such a young age, I had this lens of, okay, what do I need to do to be the person that everybody else needs me to be, wants me to be, is expecting me to be? And I think that's something that a lot of young women that in my life that I know sort of, unfortunately, are trained. I grew up in the Midwest, a lot of people-pleasing women in my home, and I think it's not a bad thing. I am so proud. I wanted to make my parents so proud. I wanted to, but that can't be the way that you live your life. And I think that it for me, I think in so many ways, I was almost afraid at first with Kode With Klossy to embark on this venture because I knew there would be a lot of people who would say, what does this model who doesn't have a college degree, doesn't work in technology, what does she have any business starting a tech education nonprofit? And they were probably right. But I'm really glad I didn't let that stop me. Yeah. And I think it continues. I mean, I think we live in a world that's so, you don't have to be a public figure. You have social media and you're constantly thinking about how something you say or do might be perceived by somebody else. And I think that as much as you can silence that and kind of connect to your gut and just trust yourself that whatever you feel is the right sort of thing for you to do or take a risk on or not, you have to trust yourself. And that's what I would say.
Beautiful. Osi?
So I might end this question the same way it started, which is with my family, in particular my mother. So there's something my mother has been telling me since I was 5, which is if you don't ask, you don't get. So when Christmas time came around, I was a shy kid. I never wanted to create a list for Santa. And my mother was like, I don't know what you want. If you don't ask me, you're not going to get it. Mm-hmm. And I think that would be the advice that I would give to young people, young women, is you need to ask. Putting your head down and doing your work and hoping someone notices you is not the path. If you want something, if you want that promotion, if you want them to see what you're doing, if you want to take that opportunity that you see over there in the distance, you have to ask for it because no one can read your mind. And so I would just say, if you don't ask, you don't get. That would be my advice.
Beautiful. Thank you. And thank both of you, really. What an incredible conversation. And I have to say, I love the two of your dynamic. You're obviously extraordinary partners. And thank you all so much for joining us, for being here with the Vital Voices Live podcast. We aim to bring extraordinary women leaders, the visionaries behind the vision together, like the two of you. And I think it's beautiful also to see the power of what happens when women from, really diverse experiences come together. That's where the magic happens. And that's certainly, I think, what we heard from both of you, and really that investment in, using your power, your platform, your voice, your experience, and giving it to the next generation. So thank you all for joining us on Vital Voices Live podcast, and we look forward to seeing you next time.